Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Season 1 of the TV version of Building the Future is now streaming online at buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Brodi Jackson, co-founder and managing partner of Kairos Ventures. Brodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. We actually got to meet in person in February when I was down in Florida, and we were at the Startup Expo conference, and so we just kind of happened to. Well, you were on a bunch of panels, and you were speaking at the conference, and then we kind of ran into each other at the networking event, and we got chatting, and I thought, wow, I should have her on the show. You guys are doing some really cool and interesting stuff, and the companies you are investing in are kind of throughout the States and even up into Canada, and you just had a recent acquisition, so you guys are doing some exciting stuff.
Yeah, well, we certainly like to think so, and we do, like you said, we have things across the U.S. and in Canada, but we are really excited about what's happening in the Southeast and here in Florida, but we're very excited about the market in Nashville and Austin and Atlanta, and we think that the Southeast has a really great tech scene going on right now.
Sure. But maybe before we kind of get into Kairos Ventures, let's get to know you a little bit better and kind of cover your background and where you grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am actually from the Midwest. I'm a Missouri girl.
Okay.
Grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere,
Nice.
but knew that I wanted to be in finance, as little as that actually meant to me at the time. It was just a big category, and that's what I wanted to do. So felt like New York was the place that I needed to go to make that happen.
Sure.
I went to Lehigh University for my undergraduate work, and again, there wasn't necessarily this huge drive that was necessarily the right school, but I knew that I needed to get closer to the East Coast. They had a great engineering school and a good business school, and so it was a really nice marriage where I did my business education, did the finance and accounting degree, but I was also able to spend a lot of time in the engineering side of the school, where I got a computer science minor and actually, learned all about coding and development, which is very applicable to what I do today.
Sure. I think that's awesome. So what kind of got you passionate about, or what made you decide like you really wanted to go into finance?
It was a little bit of, I feel like as a child, you only know a few sort of big job categories, or at least what I had exposure to sort of in a rural area. You had doctors, you had lawyers, you had professors, and you had sort of financial professionals, where they were financial advisors or your bankers, etc. And I was just gravitated to the numbers behind it, and then got interested in the idea that there was companies and stocks, and you could really sort of dig in and understand the company and their business and how they were going to grow. And I was just very gravitated to that. And so I knew that in the broadest sense, that was finance. And so that's really what piqued my interest.
Interesting. And is there something that kind of got you interested in computer science and kind of technology growing up? Or what made you kind of go into, or like minor in computer science?
Sure. So, probably dating myself a little bit, but, I would go back to the floppy disk days where,
Totally.
You traded out, the operating program for, the system operating program to then save your files. And, so I was a pretty early adopter of being interested in software and the computers and really how it could change productivity. And I actually took my first coding class in high school. It was at that time taught through the vocational school where I went to high school. But I loved just the logic to it in terms of, you could build these algorithms, and it just sort of suited my skill set from that math and logic point of view.
Sure.
So I really liked it. And then as I got into business, so I never went into, none of my jobs were necessarily coding and development related. My first job was at Arthur Andersen, but within there, and I was doing the commercial-backed mortgage securities and asset-backed securities, the structuring work and due diligence behind it. So again, back to that finance, quantitative, the number side of it, but the logic, sort of setting up those algorithms, the structuring of the CMBS securities is very similar to sort of the coding and programming, I had done on the computer science side. But yet I found that, a lot of times the software, things could be done more efficiently, but the software wasn't there to automate processes. And so actually when I was at Arthur Andersen, I actually did an in-house software development project for them to really automate our due diligence process.
Interesting.
For doing our commercial loan due diligence review. And it was something that was very cumbersome and was very manual and took all of this time. And we had our own in-house programmer in our group. And so we really worked together because I could understand, even though I could code, that's not maybe my strongest suit, but I know, and now I at least understand the thought process.
Totally.
So I understand both the coding side and that person's point of view and their thought process, but I understood the business and the business needs. And so really being able to tie those two together, because that's where a lot of times the software breaks down, is when you don't necessarily have the person who can translate the business needs into the language that the actual developer, for them to really develop an end product that really makes that product fit. And so it's interesting to see, because there's just such a growth in the area of how we're getting better at that, I think, over time.
You brought up kind of a really interesting point there. I think I'm kind of a big believer that I think coding should be kind of taught in schools. Not saying you necessarily need to become a coder one day, but if you understand it and everything's going to kind of a software, internet, computer kind of world, if it's not there already, and it's only going to get worse. And if you can understand it, you could always even potentially use it to fall back on as a career, but you could, obviously help companies going forward understand kind of like how to solve their problems with software.
Yes, I mean, I think it's even just the base of understanding logic, the concepts of if then else, and sort of loops of doing, these small loops, and they're small skills that will help, I feel like, our students no matter what they do, because again, it's just how do I develop a game plan.
Totally.
That's what a code is a lot of times. The algorithm is, okay, under all scenarios, so it could be any scenario coming in, how do I parse through it? What bucket does it fall in? You're just setting up this very logical, rational process, because it's sort of rules-based, and sort of just helping children learn that thought process, I think is going to be beneficial, regardless of what they go into.
No, yeah, like I said, I 100% agree with you. So you spent some time on Wall Street. You hung out there for a while. What made you kind of, leave that world for Southern Florida and Kairos Ventures?
Sure. So I had, been at Andersen, went somewhere else, went back to business school, and after business school, I was at Goldman Sachs. Spent a couple of years in their investment banking division, and then really wanted to do something else, wanted something more, and I really spent some time using my network within the firm and trying to figure out, because I loved the firm and wanted to stay there, how can I find that next opportunity but within the firm?
Gotcha.
And was also given the opportunity to, with another person, start a new investing business unit within the merchant bank. It was alternative investing. So we were investing in private assets, and we were really given the mandate to help grow the product offering on the private side. So not the traditional private equity firm or the traditional real estate private equity fund, but we could do sort of anything else. And because the reality of it is those two businesses, as big as they were actually pretty narrow in what they could do. Because they were so big, they had to make very big investments. So investments that were, say, $500 million investments.
Oh, wow.
They had to have control. So they had to own more than 51%. There was a lot of boxes that had to be checked off. But yet the firm saw a lot of interesting deals that didn't fit into those boxes. And so they said, we've got to figure out a way to expand what we're investing in. And so we were really given the opportunity to think about that. And so we grew the business to $3.5 billion in assets under management, and we had 4 different strategies. And ultimately, though, that was leading up into 2009 and 2010, and that when obviously there was massive cutbacks. So at that point, I ended up leaving Goldman, but I had to figure out what I wanted to do next.
Okay.
And nothing seemed quite as compelling as being one of 2 people. We grew to a team of 8 at Goldman, where we were doing everything and being very impactful. And I think kind of going back to what you said in terms of having that fallback skill set, what I understood on the technology side really was a great fallback for me at that time, where a lot of these financial firms had made investments but didn't really understand what they had invested in. And so I took sort of my technology skill set and worked with a number of different fund managers to really help them aggregate their information and analyze it. And so that was sort of, I knew that wasn't my long-term plan, but just I wanted to kind of circle back to that idea of it can be a really great fallback skill set. And, after doing that for, a period of time, I said, I really want to get back to the investing side of the world. But now that I don't have the weight of Goldman Sachs behind me, what's my real competitive advantage going to be? I don't have this huge balance sheet. I don't have just the credibility that you pick up the phone and you're from Goldman Sachs and anyone's going to take your phone call. What's going to give me edge that I'm going to be able to produce better returns for my investors? What's the asset class? What's the strategy going to be? And I spent a lot of time thinking about it and then thinking about the right team, who I wanted to sort of put together. And ultimately decided that early stage technology was the one space that I could really have a competitive advantage. And partly, unlike, say, the public markets, information is equally available. That's how we've pushed the process. It's very hard to, everyone knows essentially the same thing about the companies and their strategies. And, it felt like that wasn't going to be my space to have a real competitive advantage. When you get into later stage private equity, the deals are very competitive. There's only one winner of a deal at the end of the day, and it's the person that was willing to pay the very highest price. And a lot of that becomes a financial engineering game. So, that's not really where I want to play. Where you start coming down the scale to the earlier stage deals, and the dynamic is very different. One, we actually have access to confidential information. We are able to track our companies over a very long period of time. We're able to talk to their suppliers, to their customers. Everyone is part of the process, and really get a deep understanding of the business, the management team, the industry, the market, and then most importantly for us, what can we do with it? Where's our value add? It's very important for us to be able to have an impact on the company. And where the right strategic introduction can be game-changing for an early-stage company. And so really felt like early-stage technology was a place that I could have a real competitive advantage. And so that's, and then came to Florida largely because I felt like there was something special happening in the Southeast. And Miami has really come a long way, even since I've been down here since the beginning of 2012. They've really come along the curve of being a real, having an ecosystem and being a tech hub, and really wanted to be able to be part of that. And be there from the beginning and see the whole process, and it's been really great to be here. People don't think of Florida. It's actually one of the things I spend a lot of time talking to our government leaders here, that the image isn't out there. People think of Florida as retirement and tourism and leisure, but the reality of it is there's a really great business community here, and those of us that are here know it, but most people outside of it don't, and don't realize that it's a really great place that you can start a business. It's pretty collaborative. People are willing to network and make introductions, and it's actually been a really great place. I can also get most places across the U.S. As you mentioned earlier, we are not a Florida-focused or Southeast-focused firm by any means. We typically say that we cover east of the Mississippi. We feel like that is a really great area for us to be able to be very proactive in the market and exploring those companies.
No, I think that's awesome. And I think that's kind of what really kind of stuck out when we first talked about kind of what you guys do is, yeah, you kind of have an area, obviously, that you try to cover, but you're willing to kind of go outside that area. And I also love the fact that, you're in a spot that's, for lack of a better term, kind of like an up-and-coming kind of tech hub, right? And I think there's a lot across the nation now, and that you don't need to be in Silicon Valley to build a successful company. And, there's firms like your firm that are willing to fund and support and, basically develop these companies outside the valley, right? And I think it's super important to stress that and promote that and get the word out. And something that you kind of alluded to that kind of got me thinking, maybe a lot of people do retire in Florida, for example, but usually if you can retire, you probably did well in business or in a career, and you might be able to find a lot of like mentors or maybe people that are willing to invest as well, just because, well,
absolutely. It's such a good point, and it's actually a big part of even us being down here, because that's a big investor base for us in terms
sure.
of our firm and who's investing with us, because a lot of times we don't always recommend, say, that successful business person to go out and do this on their own, because this is our day job and we do it every day.
Sure.
But it's evolved to this really great aspect to our business where some of our sort of key investors that have amazing networks, have built businesses, they don't want to be full-time, but
sure.
they love to give some advice or make an introduction where they can. And there is a huge amount of those people who spend, at least 6 months of the year here in Florida. A lot of people retire here, and they are wonderful mentors and advisors and investors to companies. So it's been something that we've seen a lot in our own business, and we see it a lot in the market here.
No, I think that's awesome. So maybe let's kind of get let's talk kind of more exactly what Kairos is. I know it's like a venture capital firm, but for people that don't really know what that means, do you maybe want to kind of give a quick intro to the company, the kind of philosophy, and exactly kind of what you guys do, and even how do you guys decide or how to get people should pitch to you guys?
Sure. So we are an early stage technology company.
Okay.
We invest in both hardware and software. And so when we say hardware, we mean anything that's a physical product. So we have, very far on one end of the spectrum is a consumer product, wine and spirits portfolio company.
Gotcha.
The very opposite end of our hardware spectrum is an ultracapacitor company that is very R&D heavy science company that will be a component into any number of electronic devices. So anywhere on that spectrum of anything that's a physical product and physical device, that's what we consider hardware. And not all venture capital firms will invest in hardware companies. We definitely do. We have a real expertise in hardware and understand it, and so it's not 100% of our focus, but I would say typically 20 to 40% of our investments will be in hardware companies. The opposite side of that is software, anything that's in the software space, and we look typically a little bit more on the enterprise side. We really like hospitality, SaaS. We have one of our Canadian companies is a hospitality to the hotel space. Our company that was recently acquired really serviced the restaurant and nightlife space. And so we like hospitality. It's an industry we know. And then, we also really like fintech, and we have cybersecurity, fintech. Those are sort of and life sciences. And we're not doing biotech, but we think we really like the overlap of, say, our hardware knowledge and life sciences, so medical device or drug delivery, or, those are the types of things where we really want to marry our industry expertise. One of the ways that we look at it, there are platform technologies. So some people will say, well, we're looking for investments in mobile. Well, we view mobile as just a platform technology.
Sure.
The idea of augmented reality and virtual reality, those are more platform technologies that are going to impact every single business. And so we have to sort of look at industry verticals that we understand and then think about changes in platform technologies and what's that intersection? What's the impact going to be? And that's how we always think about the world as we're looking at trends. We're very top down and bottoms up. So we have, we're sort of looking at those industry verticals and platform technologies and thinking about where are some types of investments we want to be out there looking for. But a lot of times you just don't know what it is, and it's more bottoms up. Something comes across your desk and you say, okay, this looks really interesting. Now I've got to go get really smart in this. So we do both. Those are kind of the kind of broad industries we look at. And so the stage we invest at is earlier stage. So we will look at companies on the software side that typically have between $500,000 and $2 million in revenue.
Okay.
And then our goal is to really help them sort of grow to that next step. On the hardware side, we will consider investments that are pre-revenue because those are typically very R&D intensive. They've maybe got their IP at that point, their patents, etc. So there can be we will consider pre-revenue on the hardware side.
Okay. But not software then, or
Not software.
Okay.
Software needs to have revenue, and like I said, typically between $500,000 and $2 million. There just needs to be there's sort of a higher barrier to entry in terms of the hurdle of proving that market concept and really showing some market traction. So we don't really invest in sort of concept stage. It's got to be, so typically a company has maybe had some, friends and family capital come in, maybe even a little bit of seed or angel capital before we come in. And the terminology for whether it's a seed round or a Series A is a little bit all over the place.
Sure.
But, we like to think that, typically our companies are valued as a total company of $10 million or less when we invest with them.
Got you.
But we are, and maybe just to give people some color on venture in general, and people will talk a little bit about an East Coast mentality and a West Coast mentality. And I think you brought up that idea that there are great places to grow technology companies besides Silicon Valley. And it's a very different culture there. I think, they're looking at big ideas. And in fact, I was at eMerge, which is a great conference we have in Miami, and there was someone from the Facebook team who, obviously is a hugely successful company, and she was talking about when they look at, from an angel investing point of view, not really caring about revenue and where revenues were coming from and how they were going to grow revenues. It was just, how are you going to think big? How are you going to make your business bigger, grow users, or whatever the metric is? And then you can always figure out how to make money later. And I think that that's very much that Silicon Valley mindset, and we are completely the opposite. We are 100% revenue model driven.
Sure.
I need to understand how you make money, who's going to pay you for the service. People talk a lot right now about big data. Okay, it's the same idea of I'm going to get a bunch of users, then I'll figure out how to make money off of them. I'm going to get a bunch of data, then I'll figure out how to make money off of it. Well, for us, it doesn't really work that way. If you haven't figured out yourself already, who's going to buy that data, why it's valuable for them, how you're getting it that's different than someone else can, we really want to understand the business that we're investing in and how it's going to make money, which we think is, we also say what we do is a little more like private equity investing. They just happen to be early stage technology companies, but our mindset in terms of we're not looking for one home run and a bunch of zeros. We're looking for a smaller portfolio of companies that we're going to be very hands-on with them. We're going to be working with the management teams. We're going to help them execute a strategy that's fairly well defined today. And we don't need to grow it to $1 billion company because we're investing in companies that are worth $10 million or less. And most technology merger and acquisition activity, most companies don't go public. Most of them get acquired by a strategic company in the same space or by another private equity company. And the valuations, they're typically purchased at $100 million or less.
Sure.
And so that's where we're looking to invest. We want to, be able to have a really great return. But a lot of the headlines that everyone's hearing today in the news are about these unicorns and
Totally.
companies that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars at billion-dollar valuations. And it's really hard to create great returns on your capital at that stage. It's very different than what we're doing.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Like the whole Valley thing to me, I always joke that it's kind of like hot potato, where it doesn't really matter about the company. It's about like if you have the hot potato right now and you can convince other people and you just don't want to be caught with it when it's not hot anymore. And it doesn't even really matter what the company is. And I love the fact that you guys are investing in like real businesses and real ideas, because that's basically how business works, right? And I think we forget about that in the startup space so much of the time, and so many people they're like, well, I'll figure out how to make money later. It's like, well, no, that doesn't really work like that, especially if you're building like a physical store. Like if you can't just like put out a physical store and give everything away and then figure it out one day. Like it just doesn't work like that. But it's weird how online it seems to, that's totally normal in like certain parts of the world.
Yes. And it's amazing because also that's even the concept of, someone thinks, okay, I will not make any money, but it takes an enormous amount of capital to make that happen because there are, a physical location or an office space and there's real costs that someone has to finance that. But even with companies that are making money, they have revenue, but they're just not profitable because they're just growing. And there's an idea that you could run your company with the goal of I'm going to raise my next round. The idea of I'm just growing top line because that's going to get me a better valuation when I raise my next round, and I'm going to be able to raise more money. But you may have been very unprofitable with those revenue. Versus the flip side, and we like to think about it is, what about running your company so that hopefully you never have to raise another round.
Totally.
That if you are raising another round, it's because it's for growth and because you've shown an ability to take capital and make it efficient and make money with it, that now someone wants to give you more money. And they're actually two very different thought processes of how to grow and run your business. And particularly as we saw some hiccups in the public markets, that always, ultimately trickles down to the private markets and technology. And we sit down with all of our portfolio companies and said, it may not be as easy to raise money. You need to always be thinking about how can I run my business to hopefully never have to raise money, be raising money as an option, not as a necessity.
Totally. No, I think that's actually really good advice. So do you want to maybe kind of cover some of or all the companies that you guys have invested in that you're currently working with?
Sure, I would love to. One of our companies that, it's a consumer device or a consumer product, so, it's one that people can resonate with and understand. The company is called Sculpt, like you would sculpt your body, and their product is called the Chisel.
Okay.
And it was actually developed out of Harvard Medical School as a medical device.
Interesting.
So this is real, kind of R&D heavy. It was developed by the chair of the neuromuscular science area at Harvard, and his specialty is ALS. And this product was used by drug companies in their clinical trials for their ALS drugs to help measure whether their drugs were working because it measures muscle quality. So the muscle fiber strength, its density per its weight, and also the composition, so body, fat versus muscle in individual muscle groups. So not as you as a whole, but your biceps versus your triceps, or your quads versus your hamstrings, etc. And this was a very sophisticated device, but ALS is a pretty small market. And so they realized, well, what if we were to simplify the device a little bit? Would we get a reading that was acceptable for a consumer application, and could we make it at a price point that would be affordable? And so the scientists teamed up with an MIT engineer, and they started the consumer side of it. And so the idea is now there's this consumer device called the Chisel that individuals can now purchase. It then has an app on your phone that will then show you a whole map of your body in terms of your muscle quality and your body fat percentage on individual muscle groups, which is really interesting because it shows you imbalances, which I think is really interesting. I mean, we all like to see how we're doing and how we're performing, and it gives you an overall measurement as well. But when you start looking at the individual data, you now start, I know as my personal experience with it, I start thinking more holistically of, wow, I guess I don't do anything for my calves, or, my hamstrings are not as strong as my quads, and that can lead to a knee injury. And, what they're doing is they're also working with athletes, and you realize that a football player's body is going to be very different, should be very different than a tennis player or a cyclist, etc.
Right.
So it's really interesting in terms of, helping you sort of set out your training goals, measure your progress. As part of their app, they, can recommend based on, your age and demographic and your activity level and your goals, various activity, exercise plans that can work for you. So it's very exciting. They have been selling online through a number of different channels, and they're just going to be launching in brick and mortar retail this summer, which we are very excited about.
That's awesome.
So that is one, and then the medical device side of that business is still very healthy, and we're going to expand that as well. I think the other, I'll skip on to our other consumer products because I always feel like those are something that people can really resonate with. Grain and Barrel is a craft spirits company, and if everybody knows about craft beers, and that's had such a huge growth span in our country and a resurgence, and people really love it. And we're seeing that with the craft spirits as well, and the idea of I want to buy local, and there's this story behind it, and more small batch producers, and that's really happening on the spirit side as well. And so we invested in a local company they're based in Charleston, actually, is where their distillery is. And they have a few things in their portfolio, but one which is sort of applicable to our area, they have a vodka. It's General Dixie Vodka. And, it's sort of it's local, sort of southern, have it in your Bloody Marys and, or the mint juleps type of, vodka. And, we're really excited about how that's doing. The owner, is really great at branding and packaging. And, the idea is to sort of compete with Tito's, which, obviously I think has, done so well in terms of growing in that space. But, they also have a whiskey brand, and always get some eyebrows, but it's Chicken Cock Whiskey, which is a heritage brand.
Okay.
It was actually the house brand of whiskey at the Cotton Club in New York during Prohibition.
Oh, very cool.
It was from Kentucky, and so the founder actually brought that brand back and sort of tries to sort of then make it current for today. So let's take some of the old, a nod back to the old bottles and packaging and brand concept, but make it current for today. And that's what's really sort of interesting and exciting. It's sort of, bringing kind of the new craft, kind of bringing some of the old brands and making them current again. And so that's a company we're very excited about.
Sure. No, that's awesome. I love that kind of, I love how you guys are doing stuff in a bunch of different spaces. I think it keeps it probably exciting for you guys as well, but it's cool that you guys you're kind of dabbling in a bunch of different areas.
Yes. And then things get a little more technical on some of the other end of the spectrum. One of our companies called Socure, it's a financial technology company, and they're in identity verification and fraud prevention.
Okay,
And,
interesting.
I think a lot of us can relate to sort of the e-commerce point of view, but this is really used for credit card issuing banks, for remittance companies, so that's like the Western Unions, MoneyGrams of the world, or lenders, at the time that someone comes in to either open an account or do an initial transaction. It's part of their, what's called in the industry, KYC, or Know Your Customer. And as part of that process, if someone's doing it online, they have less information. It's not someone coming in and you see them face to face and you see their driver's license. It's a challenge in the industry of how does the banking world keep up with the changes in technology to service what customers want, but to still do what they need to do from a security and compliance point of view. And so today, banks typically are using the 3 credit bureaus and some other data providers that are using sort of traditional offline data sources, databases that have been aggregated on people. But if we think about it, there's a lot of millennials or people that are not American who have very thin files. They don't have this huge history piling up on them. And so it's a lot harder. It's a big challenge for the banks to sort of verify. And so this product it doesn't say don't replace what you're doing today, but let's add to it all of the data that we can be gathering that's online.
Interesting.
And to verify someone. And the best way to think about it is, someone could set up a fake Brodi Jackson email account,
Sure.
and even a fake Facebook account, but they couldn't age it. They couldn't have all the connections they should have of where I went to high school and where I went to college and every job I've had. It's actually hard to build that case. And so that just gives you, there's technology is obviously much more sophisticated than that in terms of what they're doing, but I think it helps, an average person understand, okay, that's the type of thing that they're able to uncover and really realize and highlight that to the bank. We don't think that this person is who they say they are. You should flag them. And in fact, actually, the opposite happens quite a bit. Someone that might get flagged out of the system, now you can sort of verify and get more comfort with who this person is, and actually the banks are able to do more business that way. So it's really significantly reducing fraud, but it's also increasing the total amount of business that they're able to do. And so they're doing a fantastic job. We're very excited about what they're able to do as well.
Very cool.
And
okay, keep going. Sorry.
Should I keep going?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So, we have another company called Paper Battery, and Paper Battery is actually not a battery company at all, so it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's actually an ultracapacitor, and most people won't necessarily understand what an ultracapacitor is versus a battery. But a lithium-ion battery, everyone sort of understands their pain point in terms of their cell phones and tablets, et cetera, with their very short battery life. But what happens is batteries are really good at holding big stores of power, but they're not good at dispelling it very quickly for big surges of power. So anytime you're actually speaking on the phone and downloading data, it's a big strain on the battery, and the battery becomes sort of inefficient. And a battery cannot recharge. It can only recharge, say, 1,000 times. Then your battery is just completely dead. We've all experienced that. At a certain point, you have your phone, your battery just is dead. Where an ultracapacitor is the exact opposite. So it can't hold a lot of power, but it's really good at dispelling large amounts of power quickly and recharging really quickly. And it can be recharged, 100,000 times. So very different dynamic. And so, they have a product that pairs an ultracapacitor together with a small lithium-ion battery. And it's really great for, say, the Internet of Things world. So this, wireless sensors, et cetera. Actually, the first product application is in the remote server farm market.
Makes a lot of sense.
Not super sexy and interesting, but it's a huge, huge market.
Yeah, and solves a real problem.
Excuse me?
And solves a real problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, but it's solving a real problem of battery life, and we all sort of, understand that pain point. And so the idea that their technology it's very thin, it's flexible, and it increases battery life at an actually reduced cost to the manufacturer. So it's say the Apple, Samsungs, LGs, of the world that might buy this type of a product. An individual person isn't going to buy it, but it actually, is able to improve what they can do from their form factor and improve their battery life and efficiency at actually a reduced cost for them.
Sure. No, that's awesome. And do you want to cover a couple more, or?
Sure. So, one of our more recent investments is in a company called Guest Driven.
Okay.
And, again, even though their customer is on the hotel side of the world, it's something that I think, a consumer can really understand, because today what's happened is the online travel agencies, which are the Expedias, the Hotel Tonight, the TripAdvisors, that's how most people go and discover where they're going to stay, do the discovery process, finding and making the reservations, etc. Then they actually, go and stay at the Starwood, Marriott, etc. hotel. But the problem is there's sort of now a breakdown in the hotel's ability to have a real customer relationship, because the information is not very well shared, or very limited information is shared between the Expedias and TripAdvisors of the world and the actual hotel property themselves. They don't get your actual email address most of the time.
Oh,
and
interesting.
yet there's sort of then a breakdown in the level of service and communication that hotel property can have. And so Guest Driven is sort of meant to be in between and really help facilitate the guest engagement both before their stay, during their stay, and after their stay. And from the consumer's point of view, they're just engaging with the hotel. It's not, they don't have a guest-driven app on their phone. They just get their email from email or a text message from the actual hotel property before, and maybe given options of, would you like to upgrade your room, or would you like an early check-in or an early check-out. It's ways to actually, try to, one, just increase engagement, but to sort of upsell, because now you could take a suite, which, if it's not rented out to, today's check-in, and if you don't sell it, it's sort of just unused inventory. So the idea of, okay, well, maybe I can offer that at, it'd normally be $100 more per night, but I'll offer it at $40 more per night. If the person upgrades, then they can take that base room and put it back out on Expedia and try to, sell that room out that way.
Oh,
so it's a better way, it helps them manage their inventory, increase revenue, and just, again, it helps restore that communication with their actual customer. And that's really where they're going.
Sure. No, I think that's awesome. And it sounds like that's something that's much kind of needed, right, in that space.
Yes. And it is, and then it's kind of interesting, because what really made me think about it in that light was Reserve, and they just bought our company Dash, and so this is all in the restaurant space. And if you think about it, there's people that do different parts of the restaurant space. So OpenTable is doing your table management.
Yep.
No one's doing the customer relationships management side of it. Dash was in the payment space. And actually, as part of our working with Dash, we said that they needed to do more than just being a payments company. We were pushing them to expand into the customer relationship management side of it. And they actually had built a whole analytics platform, which, to be part of that. And then there's the review side of the world, which is Yelp. And,
Sure.
There's a lot of people that don't like both OpenTable and Yelp, and, but yet that's sort of entrenched. But no one's really bringing all of those pieces together. And when they don't sync up very well, like we just talked about in the hotel space, it just hurts the overall experience for the consumer. And so Reserve is really looking at it of, how do we complete that circle? Because that's going to really help us get the consumer and have a really great experience for both the consumers and the restaurants. And, everyone sort of wins in the process if it works the way it's supposed to.
Sure. No, I think that's awesome, and it makes a lot of sense. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so maybe do you want to kind of, again, just kind of mention Kairos and where people can find you guys online, and then any of the companies that you just mentioned is under the companies tab on your website, and people can get more information?
Yes, absolutely. So our website is Caerus VC. That's CAERUSVC.com. And on there's links to all of our current companies. There's also a link that if you're a company looking for funding, we have a link where you can submit your business plan through there. And also we'll just tell you a little bit more about us, our team, and,
Sure.
and our strategy.
That's awesome. Well, Brodi, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be on the show, and I look forward to kind of keeping in touch with you and seeing the other companies that you guys invest in over 2016 and beyond.
Yes, we've got a very good pipeline right now.
That's awesome.
Of deals that we're looking at. So we're pretty excited for the outlook for 2016.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for doing this, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.